All right, we're going to be here, and in this lesson, we're going to talk about the equation for a circle and how that equation relates to the graph of a circle. So here's your standard equation for a circle: x minus h in parentheses squared plus y minus k in parentheses squared equals r squared. And what these letters stand for is they stand for the center of the circle and the radius. So the center of the circle is the point HK. Notice that in the equation, H and K are being subtracted. So when you're actually writing the center of the circle, what you will need to do is change the signs on those two numbers. Your radius is the R. And the thing you need to notice here is in the equation, R is squared. So when you're finding your actual radius, you will need to take the square root of that number. So if you look at this picture in the corner here, we have x minus 3 squared plus y plus 1 squared. So if you look at those numbers, the point you're going to get out of that for the center is positive 3 and negative 1. You change the signs on both of them. And you can see that's what they've done right here. Your radius is going to be taken from this last number here, the 25. And 25 is r squared. So that means your radius is going to be the square root of 25, or 5. And if you look at the graph here, if you were to measure the distance of the radius from the center to the outside of the circle, you would find that it is exactly 5 units long. So that's the equation of the circle, and that's how it relates to the graph. So let's go through some examples of the types of problems you might get here. Here's the first one. It says use the equation to graph the circle. So really all you need to do here is identify your center and identify your radius. So the center, we are going to change the signs on the two numbers that are with the x and the y. So that's going to become a positive 3. And then we have y plus 2. That's going to be a negative 2. So our center will be at 3, negative 2. So I'm going to go ahead and put that on the graph. 3, negative 2. We're going to have a point right there. And that's the center of the circle. The radius is going to be the square root of this number here at the end, which is the 9. So square root of 9 is 3. So our radius is 3. So what I will do to graph this, and don't be too judgy on my circle drawing skills because they're not great, that I'm going to start at the center. I'm going to go 3 up and make a point. That point would be on the circle. I'll go 3 down. There's another point on the circle. 3 to the left, 3 to the right. And I will do my best, which isn't great, to make a circle out of that. So that gives you a rough idea of what that circle should look like. But it's a circle with a center at 3, negative 2 and a radius of 3. All right, next one. We have x plus 1 squared plus y squared equals 17. So to graph this, again, I need my center point. So my center will be negative 1 because I have a positive 1 with the x, so negative 1. And then I don't have anything with the y. And that's okay. If it's just y squared by itself or just x squared by itself, the number you would use is 0. So we have a center at negative 1, 0. My radius, I have to take the square root of this number, and this is not a perfect square. But since I'm graphing this, I really just need an approximation. So I know that 17 is very close to 16. And the square root of 16 is exactly 4. This is just going to be a tad bigger than that. And so I'm actually going to approximate this. So let me, actually, instead of using an equal sign, I will use the little squiggle equals. That means approximately. And it's going to be approximately 4.1. So now I'm going to put my center at negative 1, 0 right here. And it's about 4.1. I'm going to go a little more than 4 in every direction just to get an idea of what this will look like. And that's pretty good. And I will draw my circle. Not great, but again, you get the point. So that's one situation you might get where they give you the equation, it's in the right format, and you just identify the center, identify the radius, and make your graph. But it gets more complicated. So let's look at this next one. So it says to use this equation to graph the circle, and this equation is not in the correct format. So I've got to start moving things around. So here's what I want to do first. I want to get all my x's and y's on the left, and I want to get all my constant numbers on the right. So I'm going to start moving stuff around. So I'm going to add a 12 to both sides to move that 12 over to the right. So plus 12. I'm also going to move this. I have a minus x squared, so I'm going to add an x squared to both sides. So I'll have an x squared over here. And then I have this 4y. I'm going to subtract my 4y to move it. And so when I cancel all that out and move everything around, what I should end up with is x squared plus 6x plus y squared minus 4y equals, I have 12 by itself on the other side. I want you to notice what I did too. As I did that, I rearranged the numbers, or rearranged the terms. So I know what my circle equation looks like. It's x plus something squared plus y plus something squared. So I went ahead and wrote this so I had x squared, then my term that just had an x in it, y squared, my term that just had a y in it, and put it in that order. So I did switch up the order as I did that. Okay, so now we're closer. We've got everything in the right place, but we're still not there because the circle equation had these parentheses, and they were binomials where I had x plus or minus something, and then it was squared, and same thing with y. So here's how we get there. What I want to do is I'm going to take my x's. I will put those in my parentheses. And I'm going to say x squared plus 6x. And then I'm going to say plus something else. And close my parentheses. And here's what I'm doing. I know if I can throw another number in there, I could factor this down so that I get x plus something squared. I just have to know what the other number is. And I'm going to do the same thing with y. So I'm going to have y squared minus 4y plus something. And I got to figure out what that number is. And then that's still equal to 12. So this is a process called completing the square, where we're figuring out what number could we throw into those parentheses that would give us something that would factor into a perfect square. And here's the trick to doing that. And I'm going to write this again below so I have a little more room because I kind of ran out of room with the 12 there. But I want to take my middle number, so the 6 in this case. I want to chop it in half, and then I want to square it. So here's what I mean by that. So I'll take the 6. Half of 6 is 3. 3 squared is 9. So I'm going to add a 9 here. So I'll write this off to the side. I took 6, chopped it in half, and then squared it. And that's how I got 9. So that's what I did right there. I'm going to do the same thing to my y. I'm going to take I got y squared minus 4y. So I take my negative 4, I chop it in half, divided by 2. Negative 4 divided by 2 is negative 2. And then I'm going to square that. And if I square a negative 2, I get a positive 4. So I'm going to add a 4 there. And then that's equal to 12, but not really because I just added a bunch of stuff. So this is an algebra equation, so whatever I do on one side, I have to do the other side. So because I added a 9 and a 4 on the left side, I also have to add a 9 and a 4 on the right side. So I have to keep it balanced. All right, here's why I did this whole process here. Here's why I added these numbers. Because now this is what I can do. X squared plus 6x plus 9. If you factor that into two parentheses, what you will get is x plus 3 times x plus 3. So the idea is if you think of two numbers that multiply to give you 9 and add to give you 6, it's going to be 3 and 3. So I can write this now as x plus 3 squared. I can do the same thing with the y's. If I think of two numbers that add to give or multiply to give me positive 4, add to give me negative 4, it's going to be negative 2 and negative 2. So this is going to be y minus 2 squared. So by adding those numbers, we were able to get something that factored down to a perfect square. Then on the right side of the equation, we have 12 plus 9 plus 4. So 12 plus 9 is 21 plus 4 is 25. So I'm going to rewrite this at the top because I know this is kind of messy. It might be kind of hard to read. But what we ended up with was x plus 3 squared plus y minus 2 squared equals 25. So that gives us something. We can look at this now. We can find the center and we can find the radius. So the center is going to be at negative 3 and positive 2. Change the signs on those numbers. Radius is going to be the square root of 25, which is 5. And so now I can plot this. So I'll go negative 3, 2. Got a point right there. And I'll go 5 in every direction. And make my circle. I'm getting a little better at that. That one's not too bad. All right, so there you go. That's called completing the square, and that's a technique we have to get something into the correct format so we can use it to graph. So let's do another one because I know that's kind of complicated, so we're going to get a little more practice with this. Here we go. The nice thing about this one, we don't have to move anything around first. Everything's already on the correct side of the equation. I am going to rewrite it where I change the order of these terms here. So I get everything in the order I want it. So I'm going to start with my negative x squared minus 2x. Then we got minus y squared. And we have a positive 8y. And that is equal to 8. So I just kind of switched the order around, but everything's still on the same side with the stuff it was already with. All right, here's the thing I've got this time that's a little different than the ones we looked at so far. If you remember the circle equation, that deals with the x and the y are always positive. There's no negative x. And also, if you have a negative x squared, you can't really factor that into a perfect square, because there's not two things that will multiply by themselves to get you a negative. I didn't say that very well. I'm sorry. Nothing would multiply by itself to give you a negative x. That's what I was trying to say. So we can't have a negative x squared. We can't have a negative y squared. So what you need to do in this situation is multiply the entire equation, the entire thing, by -1 and change the sign on everything. And you're allowed to do this as long as you're doing the same thing to both sides, which we are. So this is a legal algebra move we're doing here. So this becomes x squared plus 2x plus y squared minus 8y equals -8. All right, now we're going to complete the square because we need these perfect squares in parentheses. So what I'm going to do is I'll take x squared plus 2x plus something. And we got to figure out what that's going to be. And then I'm going to do the same thing. Y squared minus 8y plus something. And then that is still equal to -8. So to figure out the missing values, what I'm going to do is take the number in the middle, the 2. I'm going to chop it in half. I'll do that up here on top again. Divide it by 2. That's 1. Then I square it. And 1 squared is 1. So I'm going to add a 1 in here. So you have x squared plus 2x plus 1. For the y's, I have a -8. I chop it in half. Get -4. I square the -4. And I get +16. So one thing to keep in mind, the numbers you're going to add when you complete the square are always going to end up being positive numbers. So keep that in mind. So what I did is I added a 1 and I added a 16. So if I add those on the left side of the equation, also have to add them on the right. All right, so now I can simplify this, factor these down. So x squared plus 2x plus 1. If I factor that, I'm thinking what two numbers multiply to give me positive 1, add to give me positive 2. It's going to be 1 and 1. So that should factor to x plus 1 squared. Go to my y's. Got to multiply to give me 16, add to give me negative 8. So that's going to be negative 4 and negative 4. So it's going to be y minus 4 squared. And then I'm going to simplify on the right here, negative 8 plus 1 plus 16. That gives me positive 9 when I add those together. So that's my equation now. I have x plus 1 squared plus y minus 4 squared equals 9. So I can identify my center. That's going to be at negative 1 and positive 4. I changed the signs. And then my radius is going to be at, my radius is going to be 3. I take the square root of 9. So now I can plot my center point, negative 1, positive 4. That puts it up here. I go out 3 in every direction because that's my radius. And that gives me a circle I can draw. And there we go. So that's how you take the equation of the circle, get it in the correct format if necessary, and then use that to graph the circle.